So hello everyone, my name is John with the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. We play games every single week, same time, same place. And this week we're playing a game called Guild of Dungeoneering, and we're here with the developer, Colm Larkin. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Great. Thanks
Uh,
for having me on.
no, thank you for joining us. And as we do every week, we play various games, and when we can, we try to talk to the developer or someone related to the game itself. And Versus Evil, Colm, they reached out to us, and we thought the game was very fascinating. So we thought it would be a great fit for the week. And for people that don't know, I guess you, Colm, can you give a little bit of background into who you are, what you do, and how you got into game development?
Yeah, absolutely. My background is programming and always, always loved games and tried making games, but actually this is our first commercial game. So we kind of went straight into it. It started out me, but very quickly joined by Fred, who's the artist.
Hmm.
And we were kind of working on our free time for a while. And then I went full time. This was last year.
Mm.
And from there grew a few more people, signed a deal with the publisher. That's Versus Evil.
Yeah,
Um, and for the kind of the last 6 months until we released the game in July, there were five of us.
nice.
Um, so it kind of grew and grew, kind of like a snowball rolling along, kind of grew in momentum as well.
Awesome. And for Guild of Dungeoneering, this is your very first game from your company, correct?
That's right, yeah. And before that, really all I had made was kind of game jam level games.
Yeah. Um, if you don't mind me asking, how did you come up with Guild of Dungeoneering? Like, how was this idea conceived of and all come together?
Yeah, so I made it was a game jam idea, but I made a very, very terrible prototype that you can still play. It's on the website on
Hmm.
my website, gambrinous.com. But basically, I took part in one game a month, which is like a monthly game jam. It's really
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the first prototypes I made was a small game where you laid out tiles. Um, and you can see kind of the seed that became Gilded Engineering there, but
Hmm.
it's really very basic.
Yeah.
But it was about kind of building a map and your hero moving around it by themselves. Um, so I kind of did a few little prototypes like that for a few months, and I kind of then got the feeling that I could maybe finish games, rather than starting projects that I never finished, which is what I used to do.
Yeah.
And I kind of went back and picked one of the one game a month prototypes, and it's this one that became Gilded Engineering then.
That's cool.
The
So,
ideas kind of grew from there. So stuff like adding cards,
mm,
uh, making the hero move by themselves. That was just a crazy idea that came to me one day.
awesome.
Which caused a lot of heartache as well, caused a lot of design problems.
How so? Can you describe some of the problems?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a thing that defines the game. It's I guess our unique twist. So it's a nice thing to have something like that, to kind of set you apart, to give people a reason to look deeper into your game.
Mm,
But if there is a problem, if you want your game, particularly a turn-based game, it's got to be all about like strategy, maybe even mixed with short-term tactics,
mm,
decisions, basically. And we took away the biggest decision in any game, which is moving your hero.
mm.
So it caused a lot of trouble, just over the 2 years or so development around trying to make the game fun despite keeping this core mechanic.
I see. So we're going to get into the game a little bit about, as you're describing this. And if anyone wants to win a copy of the game as well, we're actually giving away about 5 copies. So if you just type in hashtag dungeon, you'll be entered to win the giveaway. We'll pick all the winners at the end of the stream. So just letting you guys know throughout the stream, I'll be mentioning that so everyone can join in. And on the stream, you can actually see Colm as a digitized version of a Dungeoneering character, correct?
Yeah, so Fred, who's our artist extraordinaire, did a little character like that in the style of the game,
Hmm,
of each of us on the team. So yeah, it's really fun.
that's awesome.
Uh, Owen, our main programmer, actually likes making stuff, so he actually made little printed versions of these and put like little safety pins in them. So they're like with a little scroll at the bottom. So mine says column. So
Hmm,
they're like cool little name tags. So we wear those for like conferences and meetups and stuff.
that's awesome. So yeah, going into the game itself, I guess this first part is like the main hub, you would say.
Yeah, so you're kind of looking at the metagame. Uh, we're casting you as the player. You are the guild master,
Hmm.
so you're running a guild, and any one particular hero is kind of your little hench person. Your kind of intern, maybe. You're kind of they're kind of replaceable, and you're kind of sending them off to their doom a bit.
Yeah.
Um, so this is just the start. You start with one little room.
Hmm.
It's got a chomp, which is the first kind of character class you can hire. Basically, if you go into adventure, well, actually, just before that, maybe look into expand guild.
Mm.
It kind of shows you the metagame. There is all the different rooms you can unlock, and
Yeah.
that's kind of the long term progress of the game is to keep building up your guild, and you unlock all kinds of things, lots of new classes, upgrades to the kind of loot you can find in game.
That's cool.
But but the meat of the game is running dungeons.
Hmm. And
Uh,
yeah, let's get into that.
yeah,
And just out of curiosity as well, there seems to be a lot of personality, both with the music, the visuals, the way that, when you poke your character, it's very Fourth Wall-y. Was that all, obviously intentional, and what were you
yeah,
inspired by?
yeah. Inspired by I guess a lifetime of things like Monty Python and
Mm.
Terry Pratchett, all that kind of self-referential humor. Um, you know, play and then all the things it pokes fun at. Playing D&D when I was a kid. All the kind of tropes we're trying to kind of poke at are things anyone who's familiar with that kind of gaming
Awesome.
will see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go exploring, and whoa. So I only played a little bit of the game so far, so I'm just getting into kind of the guts of the story a little bit, and the guts of the adventure. So whoa, all this stuff opened up. I did not even know. So going into the game, it's also very card based, I saw. How did that come about?
So I play a lot of board games. Probably board games are my favorite leisure activity, and that includes card games as well.
Hmm.
Physical board games and card games. So basically, the cool things from board games and card games kind of bled into all my game design
Hmm.
efforts. So anytime I was thinking about, oh, I should give you a choice of a few different things, I naturally felt like drawing cards was a nice way to do that.
Mm.
And then that really feeds into you'll see when you get into battle here.
Yeah.
When you're in battle, there's a separate little card game, but it has very light deck building, and deck building is just something I really enjoy in games.
Mm. Uh,
So
Go ahead.
so the first layer is there where you're putting out rooms. So we're kind of saying you get to build the dungeon.
Yeah.
So you add rooms. You actually decide when and how your hero is going to fight monsters, sort of, because they move on their own.
Mm.
But you can direct them in certain ways. You can put down loot. You can put down rooms connecting them to the hard monster when you want them to fight the hard monster. That kind of stuff.
That's cool. And so when you get into battle here too, it's all, it does feel very much like a board game or like a Dungeons and Dragons versus, I guess, any kind of magical card game, in that sense.
Absolutely. So
Mhm.
this one, maybe one of my favorite bits about the game is that the battle system is really quite tightly balanced, I guess.
Mhm.
So you do have to pay attention. And for example, we make the monsters also have their little deck of cards, but we make them play their card first. So you
Mhm.
always see what they're doing. So the game or the way to win is really about managing each turn, kind of like reacting to what they're doing,
Mm. Did,
and being better than them somehow. So you
did
can
you?
see that.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
So you can, it's not about like outguessing,
Mhm.
which actually was in the first version of this the battle system.
Mhm.
It's more about your cards as kind of like a resource and how you beat the enemy. So for example, we completely reset your health to full after each fight,
Yeah.
and your deck and everything. It all goes back to full.
So I was going to actually ask you about that. So, like, how did you come to that realization that you wanted to, make the enemy's cards visible and them to go first and to reset your health? Like, was that all through playtesting or was that just through just inspiration, I guess?
Playtesting definitely.
Yeah.
I actually designed the first version of the thing, and it wasn't very good.
Mm.
And in January, I hired Ollie, who was the game designer then on the game. So it started out just some background there. It started out I was kind of doing everything except the art,
Hmm.
and by the end, I was actually doing nothing anymore. I was more like the director or the producer, where I was just kind of had found people to help with every different part I used to.
Mm.
So anyway, Ollie came in, and his first job was, I said, I have this rough version of the battle system. I have the idea that cards should represent moves, and that you should get new moves from equipment. And that classes might have different starting sets. So
Mm.
that was kind of the basis. But the actual battle system was terrible. It was kind of like rock paper scissors. You blind placed your card, and the monster did the same. And
Mm.
there was a bit of an element of choosing correctly, which seemed like it might be fun, but
Yeah.
in practice it just wasn't any good.
Mm.
Um, so we brought that version of the game actually to PAX, our very first PAX, our first showing of the game to the greater public.
Awesome.
Uh, People really liked the game, uh, but we knew we could do better with the battle system. And very quickly, a few weeks later, we had the first version of the battle system. It was very like what's here now,
Mm.
and it was far better.
Awesome. And another question I have for you is the movement itself. So you don't control the character, but you can control, kind of influence a little bit of where they go, correct?
That's right. So it's not random.
Hmm.
It's kind of just based on kind of scoring. So they kind of examine the dungeon. They look at rooms they haven't been to. They look for monsters near their level. So you want to fight like monsters. They look for loot you've put down. So you'll get yellow cards like coins and gems, and you can put them around the dungeon as ways to influence the hero.
Mm. Got it.
Um, so it's something you can learn. So actually, even the blue footsteps,
Yeah.
that shows you where they're moving to next, and you can see how it changes when you put down something like the gold pouch. They'll be like, oh, so you're kind of like learning how to influence the hero's movement.
Awesome. And I'm curious a bit about your, development history as well, being in Ireland itself. How is the game development community there? How is, the influences around you very different, do you think, from developers in America or developers, worldwide?
Um, so our influences, I think, are similar.
Hmm.
The the interconnectedness of the whole world now means we have access to a lot of things that would have been a lot harder
Hmm.
10 years ago, say. So this even, I can go on Twitch with you,
Yeah.
and it doesn't require, it makes no difference that I'm in Ireland.
Mm.
Um, so that's great. So for example, I did a whole deal with our publisher, all over email and Skype.
Hmm.
I never met any of them until the deal was done, and this took months.
Mm.
And then, right after the deal was done, flew out to Texas for PAX where we were showing the game. That's when I met the guys for the first time.
Yeah.
So I mean, that just shows, you don't have to be somewhere where all the game infrastructure and third parties are to be
Mm.
able to interact with them. Um, on the other side of your question, which was about the game dev community here in Ireland, I think it's amazing. It's a really friendly, supportive community. People making interesting games, kind of at all levels. Really regular meetups. I help organize one meetup that meets every month.
Mm.
It's a one game a month meetup, which I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a monthly game jam. There's another one called Dubludo, meets every 1 to 2 months, and they're great places. Both of them actually are great places to showcase something you're working on,
Hmm.
which is something we did a lot with Guild of Dungeoneering. We kept bringing very rough early versions and watching people play and getting feedback. And that's something I'd highly recommend to every other dev.
Awesome. And, talking a bit more about that too, did you, choose to go indie because of your experience in the game development world, or what was your choice to go in this direction, the game development wise?
I'd been kind of following game development for a while. Around 2008, I actually kind of started wanting to make Flash games.
Hmm.
So I saw they were kind of doing quite well, and they were kind of accessible to someone who didn't have much experience. By the time I got around to making a game, I didn't think they were that good an idea anymore. And I thought going to something like Steam was much better.
Mm.
So that's kind of like what I set out to do. Um, Being indie, I mean, it's just a side effect of not being a giant company and not wanting VC. I
Mm.
mean, it's kind of the default for me.
I see. And I saw that this game engine used Flixel, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, and this comes from what I was saying, where I wanted to do Flash. So Flixel's like a library for game engines built with ActionScript. So,
Hmm.
um, and it was what I was using for game jams.
That's awesome.
It really helps you kind of very quickly get something working and playable, which is great. Um,
Awesome.
so I just kind of stuck with it
Very cool.
for making a real game. It has limitations, so you wouldn't want to do, or you can't really do a 3D game through Flash,
Hmm.
or it'll be problematic. But basically, all the problems of Flash weren't really problems for the kind of game I was making.
Very cool. Dempool on the stream is asking, so how long did this game take to make from, I guess, the beginning of your game jam to its final creation here?
It's a great question. So time-wise, it started in October 2013
Hmm.
and it released in July 2015. So it was about a year and 9 months ish.
Mm.
But it kind of went through various phases. At all times, I was working on it. So
Yeah.
I started doing it in my weekends for like the first 6 months, and then I gave up my job as a software engineer, so not in games, but programmer,
Mm.
and went on it full time for the next year and a bit until launch, and over that time started adding extra people. So there was Owen the programmer joined for like the 9 months leading up to launch. Ollie the game designer joined for the 6 months leading up to launch. So it was
Mm.
kind of started me and Fred, who's the artist, in our free time, and then we slowly kind of increased our bandwidth.
Hmm. Awesome.
So there's 5 people total by the end.
Uh, and I guess and this is more of just like a game development team question. Working with that size group, and you were saying like all around the world, correct?
Yeah, there was a mix. So Ollie was in London. I'm based in Dublin.
Hmm.
Owen is here in Dublin with me. So I met Owen via one of those meetups I mentioned earlier. Fred, who's the artist, I knew him from when he used to live in Ireland, but he's based in Sydney in Australia.
Hmm.
So we have no office. We all work remotely. We collaborate online using Slack. So we
Yeah.
don't even use email. It's like a persistent chat room. It's really great for this kind of thing. Um,
Mm.
and the kind of people I've found are people who are pretty much good at being self-starters
Yeah.
and kind of working independently, working at their own pace and time, and it's worked out really well.
That's cool.
So it's actually something I'm considering for long-term work. Is like, do you really need an office?
Mm. Um, I guess another question that's been asked on the stream, and you kind of talked about this a little bit already. Frostham was asking what inspired the art style and of the game.
So I started shopping around for someone to partner with to do the art really early on. I knew having original art was important. At that point, I'd actually built a small prototype of the game using free pixel art, um, which was cool, and it's a great idea. It actually makes it easier to find an art partner because you're much more serious. You're not just an idea person. You've actually made something, and they can look at it and see if it's interesting. Um, so while I was looking for artists, I was kind of advertising online.
Hmm.
Um, I started thinking about what could I do myself if I had to, if I couldn't find an artist. And I was thinking, what if I just got out square graph paper and drew on it and scanned in the pretty awful kind of little doodles I would have and
Hmm.
make them the tiles and the little cardboard tokens. They would just all be really homemade looking. And
Hmm.
I thought, that would be, it would at least be a slightly different style, which I
Mm.
think is an important thing for games. Is try and have an aesthetic that stands out. Try and do something different with your look.
Mm.
Um, so I kind of explained that when Fred came on board, which was only a few weeks later, really early. So this was November 2013, kind of 1 month into the project. And I said that to him, and he kind of said, "That's a cool idea," and came back pretty much the next day with some concepts that are really like what's in the game now.
Mm.
This is beautiful. The taking my really rough idea and really like showing what you can do with it with some talent.
No, it's really cool, and I think that both from the card art to the little animations, there's like a lot of flourishes that bring about both childhood memories and with some modern flourishes. So it's for me, it's really fascinating. It's nostalgic in some ways.
Yeah, and I mean that was the other reason for it. The kind of game we're making, and certainly the kind of person I was targeting with this game.
Mhm.
It's just like me, a bit older. I'm 35 now. Maybe someone who's played D&D but doesn't get to anymore. Played role-playing games in person but doesn't get to. So that's where the graph paper and the drawing of the map and the all that kind of stuff comes from.
Awesome. And let's talk a little bit, I guess, about you talked a little bit about Monty Python. I'm just curious, what are your other inspirations, both in terms of games and in terms of just general media and life?
God, there's a lot.
Yeah.
Play a lot of games.
Mhm.
Uh, watch a lot of movies, TV.
Yeah.
Um, Board games were a kind of an obvious inspiration for this. So the really early one game a month prototype, I was specifically thinking of an old board game we used to have in the 80s, called Dungeon Quest.
Hmm.
And in that one, you have a little hero, or you each have one, but you basically walk into it's kind of tile based, but you walk through a doorway, you don't know what's there, and you pick a tile, kind of like Scrabble, and turn it over, and it could be, a dead end, it could have a monster in it, it could be a portcullis falling behind you. So that was the idea of walk into a new tile and then to see what's in that tile.
Hmm.
But from there, obviously, it's changed an awful lot.
Okay. I see. And sorry, while I'm playing through this right now too, I'm also seeing that there's a lot of symbols on the games. Just out of curiosity, do you have any tips for new players or even for veteran Dungeoneers while they're playing this
Yeah,
game?
so the main thing, which just watching you play you are doing, the main thing is in battle, just read what their card does.
Hmm.
So you can hover over cards, little tooltip pops up and explains. Because uh, also they have like some of the monsters have special traits,
Hmm.
and they'll pop up in battle, kind of just beside their picture, and hovering over them explains what they are. So I think you're about to fight a guy with Fury. Um, so Fury, for example, is one that catches people out pretty often. So the monster will do extra damage when they're on low health.
I see. Oh, I see it now.
Yeah,
Literally his one move became his two became three for hitting attacks. So that was
yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
easy to get caught out by that.
Yeah.
In fact, so we noticed that in early version of the game, kind of a month before our launch, we had shared a version of the game with some people. We noticed that Fury just kept getting caught out by people. So
Mhm.
one of the late game classes towards the end of the game is called the Cartomancer, and his so each of the classes you unlock have their own kind of personality that we deliver through all the little things they say.
Mhm.
And the Cartomancer's kind of personality is to be a total like kind of uh, rules lawyer, like one of those people who's kind of really annoying, always pointing out like rules you didn't know about.
Mhm.
And so we had his lines reference some of the things we'd noticed players not doing. So he says
Mhm.
stuff like when he's about to fight a monster, he says, "Oh, please no, like please sorry, please pay attention to Fury this time."
Mhm.
So we're just kind of poking fun at some of the things we had noticed players doing.
That's cool though. Like you're trying to acknowledge because in this game isn't very obviously realistic. It's more fourth worldy. It can talk to the player all the time.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and it does let you do a lot of fun stuff like that.
Cool. I guess, obviously, I don't think, the world is really important here, but do you think games that poke fun at the player and talk to the player, is that something really enjoyable to you? Is that something you think more games should be doing, or just your philosophy in games, I guess?
So I think particularly in kind of fantasy RPGs,
Hmm.
there's a tendency with the big budget ones to take themselves too seriously.
Hmm.
Um, that their world has to be 100% believable,
Yeah.
and that there's no room for silliness. And I I've certainly in all the games I've made, there's always room for silliness and poking fun, and they are games, they are entertainment, and you can achieve art and still be silly.
Hmm.
Um, I don't find that if we're silly, we're making jokes.
Hmm.
You can still have a game that's really fun and interesting and achieve something there without giving up. Without having to be serious.
Hmm.
Um, so it's definitely something I like.
Okay. Very cool. Um, And just as a reminder for people just watching the stream now, if you type in hashtag dungeon into the chat window, um, you'll be entered to win a copy of this game for yourself. It'll be a Steam key, so just type in hashtag dungeon anytime before the end of the stream, and we'll choose about 4 to 5 winners before we end the day. So just a reminder. Um, so we're back in the hub area. I just had a victory, so I'm pretty happy.
So you unlocked the graveyard earlier, which is cool. You'll need that graveyard.
Yeah.
But you could now expand the guild, so you got enough gold from winning a quest that you can
Hmm.
now unlock something new.
Okay. And so loot, magic, and might.
Yeah, so they're the main avenues. So loot adds new cards you can find. So briefly, the loot system is anytime your hero beats a monster, they'll get your choice of one of 3 pieces of loot.
Hmm.
And these are things that add to your hero and generally speaking add new cards to his deck. So you're doing the deck building.
I see.
So if you click into one of those, you kind of see a preview of the cards or the cards that'll be added.
I see.
So the way you get these is in future adventures they'll turn up and they're upgrades. They're and better pieces of equipment.
And so
So
yeah, and so like other RPGs, like it's a tier system. So as you unlock the whole tier, the next tier will appear, and so on.
yes, yeah, and they get more and more expensive.
Okay.
Um, so the other side of the unlocks in both might and magic
Hmm.
are about half of the unlocks in might and magic are new classes.
Okay.
So the idea here is that your starting chump, all your chumps are the same. They're pretty bad. But as you unlock new ones, they actually give you very different specializations and abilities.
Very cool.
Uh,
Do you recommend one over the other?
of the starting ones, they're all pretty cool. The Bruiser is probably the most powerful one,
Hmm.
and I think maybe the Apprentice is my favorite one.
Okay.
Um, and the two of them are very different styles. So actually, they'd be good first unlocks for you, or maybe just choose one of them, and then we'll come back and try one of the other ones later on.
Okay. Sounds good. So we'll make the library. I'm a little ahead of the stream, so I do apologize. Um, New Dungeoneer arrived. Cool. I do like how this keeps expanding. Like a lot of the base building games that whether it's like they're an RTS or turn-based game, like I do enjoy the base building and building your hub bigger and bigger until I'm sure it's massive by the end of the game.
Yeah, and this side of it is quite light, so you do get to lay out your rooms, but it's not like it has really any effect. It's more visual for fun.
Mm, got it.
And
Got
so
it.
one thing you can do here is if you click into Dungeoneers
Hmm.
and then click on the apprentice you just hired, you'll
Yeah.
actually see exactly what their deck is.
Very cool.
So you can actually see that before you unlock them. You can click into them. It kind of shows you a little picture of their hero. You can click again, and you'll get this preview of what their deck is going to be.
Awesome. Yeah. So this person is talented. They have a lot of magic spells, obviously, drawing 2 cards, which is really
Yeah,
nice. Yeah.
and the talented is why I like apprentice.
Oh.
So it kind of will make more sense as we kind of dip into how the equipment works. So starting with fire 1 is actually means they get another card, a 7th card.
Mm.
And generally how you'd get that is you'd find equipment with fire. And these skills stack. So you'll find if you pick equipment that also grants you fire, you'll get access to the better fire cards quicker.
Very cool.
So you're kind of digging into this set of 4 different fire cards.
Awesome. So we're going to go back to Dungeoneering a little bit while we talk a little more. I had 2 distinct questions that come to mind as I'm listening to this, especially. One, the music is crazy. It's so addictive to listen to. The theme song, which we'll go back to and play a little bit, and the rest of the music. Um, who worked on the music? How did you come up with it, and how did you integrate it into the game? A lot of questions, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So the music, yeah, it really adds a lot of charm. Um, and I don't know, almost like a veneer of professionalism, like having really good voice acting
Hmm.
um, on top of the game. So Steve Gregan is the composer,
Mhm.
and I found him through the Irish game dev community, um, and asked him would he do the soundtrack. Kind of didn't give him that much guidance
Mhm.
because sometimes your game kind of lends itself very strongly to music,
Hmm.
but despite our end result, certainly at the time, I didn't have a strong feeling for the kind of music we should have.
Mm.
But one thing I did want was I wanted a theme tune with singing.
Okay.
I wanted to see could we do that, or
Mm.
actually really a really memorable theme tune. And the idea of singing then came a little later. And the reason for that was um, I'd been playing Papers, Please,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with.
Hmm.
And as soon as you start up Papers, Please, this incredible kind of Eastern European style marching music comes on,
Yeah.
and the logo bounces up and down to the theme music, and that had stuck with me, and I thought that's so strong. Like immediately, you haven't even played the game, but you have an idea of the feel of the game,
Mm.
and that was something I wanted to try and ape with our own thing. And eventually, the suggestion I put to Steve was, what if it was kind of like a Monty Python esque, very silly lyric song?
Mm.
And he kind of started investigating that and kind of writing some lyrics and kind of starting to record some stuff. And then he was actually at a gig with some traditional Irish music and singing. And as he was listening to some of the songs, he started thinking, actually, this could work. This song could work as that silly song. Just change the lyrics.
Mm.
And he eventually ended up getting one of those musicians he saw play to perform for us.
Awesome.
So there's one guy did the title screen theme tune,
Hmm.
and then another guy did the the asides, the bard.
Mm.
So we'll talk about that in a sec as well.
Sure.
But it really transformed the feel. So first of all, the title screen music and the song, it's great.
Hmm.
And it does exactly what that music did in Papers, Please. So you haven't even started playing the game, you already know it's going to be silly. You're running a guild, lots of things,
Mm.
which is great. And then the idea of the bard, Steve came up with himself,
Mm.
and he basically said, "What if we used, in the same style as the theme tune, this idea of someone kind of just talking about your exploits as you do them?"
Hmm.
And when he came to me with that idea, he had already recorded a few, and he had actually recorded about 10 of the death ones.
Yeah.
So when you lose, they're all mocking you. Um, so we put them in the game, and I just fell in love with them. I straight away said, "Yeah, go back, do these for everything in the game."
Mm.
So funnily enough, we don't have that many.
Mm.
So there's about 10 different ones that are chosen at random for when you lose, and 10 different ones for when you win.
Yeah.
And then there's specific, unique ones that play, the first time you start a new game, the first time you reach new areas in the map, and the first time you unlock any of the classes.
Mm.
There's a little ditty comes up talking about the class.
Yeah.
But it's surprising how much character and fun that little bit of, like I said, voice acting essentially adds to it.
Yeah, and it's funny. The bard reminds me. I don't know if this is what you're going for, but Captain Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean, or one of those pirates, I guess, that are just singing a tune about their boats
Kind
or
of,
whatever. I don't know
yeah,
why it
kind of
reminded me of that.
self-narrating almost.
Exactly. We have a lot of questions here. Let's see. We'll go with this one question. Are any of the characters based on the developers or the family of the developers?
We did put in all our names, so
Hmm.
there's a kind of a pool of names when you get a new
Yeah.
guy or girl, and they're just picked at random from that. So we put in all our names. So I do occasionally see someone posting a screenshot or a stream where I see one of our names,
Mm.
and that's funny.
That's awesome.
Um, the class types themselves,
Hmm.
not really. I the the kind of character I wrote for the Bruiser is kind of like in the style of like a British chav or thug.
Uh-huh.
And Ollie is from London, so he was claiming that I was attacking him by putting that in the game, very jokingly, obviously. Um, and Fred is from Australia, and I had been trying to think of ways to make the Ranger more like Crocodile Dundee or someone like that, but in the end that didn't quite work out.
I see.
But apart from that, no, not really any links to us.
Okay. Another question, is it possible to implement a multiplayer into the game, or have you thought about multiplayer for the game at all?
Yeah, I mean, it comes up a lot. So, anytime anyone ever saw this during development, that was probably the number one question.
Hmm.
This would be cool with multiplayer.
Yeah.
Um, the main reason we didn't do multiplayer was to be able to finish the game.
Hmm.
First time making of a real game, it still took us about a year longer than I had thought,
Yeah.
and you know, treble the amount of people involved at the same time. Um, but yes, multiplayer would be really interesting. So we might look at it, for a sequel or for a spin-off,
Mm.
um, or actually where I think it would make, incredible sense would be if we would do like a board game, a physical board game
Yeah.
version that used this idea. Then definitely for, to me with board games, it's really about the social aspect, and then you definitely would make it multiplayer.
Mm.
And multiplayer would actually help with a lot of things as well. It would, for one thing, so one of the kind of design problems we had from the beginning was what is the challenge to put down like hard monsters or negative things? Why wouldn't I just farm, really easy things and just make
Yeah.
sure my guy is safe? And multiplayer, we could a really easy way to do that is to have, each of you with your own hero on the board
Hmm.
and let you put down things near your hero or near someone else's hero, so you're torn each turn between putting things down that you need or putting things down to obstruct other players,
Hmm.
which is, it's a fun mechanic.
Exactly. So you created both a co-op and a competitive aspect to the game.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It'd be even more interesting to see if the physical game could interact with the digital game, which would be a lot of work, I'm sure. But um, I don't know. It seems like so many people want to revitalize board games again, and with digital games being such a boon, I'm curious if there is a link there. But that's just me thinking out loud.
There probably are cool
Yeah.
ways.
Mhm.
Some people have used the game in funny ways.
Mm.
So the game as it is now, some people have told me they've built dungeons like you're doing now,
Mhm.
and use them in their like tabletop uh, DMing sessions,
Interesting.
um, which is kind of funny. Um,
Mm.
so that's another thing we're kind of going to look at. We've built a really rough tool to be able to lay out dungeons.
Mhm.
So kind of the starting setup for dungeons. So that could be a tool we share for people like who just want to build out dungeons and look at them or use them to as maps
Mm.
for DMing. But also might be a tool we can use to let players kind of make their own scenarios.
I see. That's cool.
So that's one of the things we're looking for.
Really building up the choose your own adventure kind of aspect of it, I guess.
Yeah, and
Mm.
it would be really cool. It's a bit like modding. So
Mm.
modding plus a tool to make it easier. Um, it is always interesting to see what people come up with.
So speaking of modding, this is a good segue. Another question on the chat is, what is there a modding community, do you know, behind this game at all, or any opportunities for modding?
There's none at all yet,
Hmm.
in that we haven't made the game moddable.
Hmm.
So, generally, and actually the game should be very moddable because, um, you, everything's kind of defined in text and stuff. But just we wrap all that text into it's kind of hidden in the game files.
Yeah.
So to make it moddable, we just kind of need to move them out into folders and make it so that you can load mods or something. Just kind of make it a little easier on people.
I got it.
So we're definitely gonna look into that, but right now there's just no way to mod the game. So obviously no one has done so.
Mm. Okay, good to know. Um, it's interesting. I don't know if you noticed this trend. I've noticed a lot of card games this past year. And do you think there is this want for like maybe nostalgia for the card games and the physical games that have kind of translated into these digital games? Just out of curiosity, like why do you think there are so many of these card games out
Yeah.
there? It's
Well,
interesting
there's
to me.
one cool thing that has happened is that the actual physical card games and board games, a lot of them have been ported
Mm.
to digital. So, um, probably the most played game on my phone is Ascension,
Hmm.
which is a really cool game. It's a physical card game, and first and foremost. But I've never played the physical card game. I've played hundreds of hours of the
Mm.
digital port of it. So
Yeah.
there is a real great market for playing multiplayer games of that sort. So I know Carcassonne is another good one. And
Mm,
actually, Carcassonne has tile laying elements that um, inspired Gilded Engineering as well.
mm,
Um, and both, and that's just another example of a game that's made that leap.
mm,
So there's the actual games that people like in physical board and card games are now playable on digital stuff. Uh, and I think it's actually the rise of board games and
mm,
the elegance of board games. So if you're making a board or a card game, a physical one,
mm,
you can't rely on great graphics or great voiceover or great cinematic stuff.
mm,
Your game design has to be golden for a good successful game,
mm.
uh, and they are. So all the really interesting games I'm playing are amazing, and
Yeah.
I think that's certainly the reason I'm taking elements of them and trying to bring them to digital. Is that I just think they're really good games.
Mm. No, and I don't disagree at all. And I think a lot of the great games this year have been or included some kind of physical aspect of it or some kind of physical digital version of that aspect, whether it's a card game or like a tabletop representation. I've been very fascinated by that this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or even the discrete elements. So like we use cards, like this is an obvious card game where you're looking at,
Mm,
but then the other side of it where you're drawing cards to build the dungeon with,
mm,
that needn't have been cards. We could have done that some other way.
mm. No, it's cool. Let's see. Oh, that's silly. Someone mentioned Yu-Gi-Oh. um, no, it's funny because I've been playing a lot of games this year, and from Gwent to Hearthstone to this game, that theme just it's just funny to see keep coming back in a good way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot of card games.
yeah,
I like cards.
hmm
Um, so cards have nice intrinsic properties.
indeed.
Um, so you see this in our game. You start with a deck of six,
Hmm.
and you add cards by getting loot, and eventually your deck could be like 20 cards.
Yeah,
Um, but cards have a nice intrinsic property that if you have 20 cards and one really good card,
mm,
you have a low chance of getting that,
yeah,
in your starting hand or even in any given fight.
mm,
And we don't have to explain that to people. That's really obvious.
mm, no,
So that's a nice property when you use cards. You
yeah,
can think about like deck thinning as a side effect.
cool. Um, just a couple more questions from me, and if anyone has questions, again, please put them in the chat. Your company name, Gambrinous, right? Or Gambrinous? I'm sorry if I'm saying it
I
wrong.
say Gambrinous, but it is a made-up word, so
I was gonna ask
can't hold
you.
that against anyone.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you what does it stand for, and what was the thinking behind the name?
It's a totally made-up word, so there's really nothing from that. I picked it in 2008. I wanted a
Mhm.
unique name that wasn't taken already, so I was just kind of thinking of random words and went with that one.
Okay, very cool.
There's no meaning behind it.
It's good to know. And for your next projects, for your future stuff you want to work on, is there either something you have in mind already or a dream project you hope to work on?
So I don't even have a vague idea yet on what I'd like to work on next.
Hmm.
Um, my immediate plans are to work on more Gilded Engineering stuff. So we made a really small expansion there that came out last week. We're thinking of doing a few smaller expansions.
Hmm.
We're thinking of porting it to a couple more platforms, and then looking at more esoteric options like a board game. Um,
Mm.
so I think we're going to be kept busy with just variations on this game for at least the next year. My plan then, or my hope, would be to maybe do a series of kind of game jams,
Mm.
make some prototypes, and pick something that like actually make a series of viable prototypes, and then choose one that's more interesting.
Very cool.
Um, so I hope we'll be in the space to be able to do that.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
And it seems like, game jams are, of course, they're important, but for your development and it seems like your career, game jams have been very intrinsic to your career. Could you mention, I guess, how you feel the importance of game jams are to game developers in general, and any game jams you suggest for people to look into?
Yeah, I very much what you just said. They have been intrinsic, and doing a game jam is the number one thing I'd recommend to someone who wants to try and get into game making. Um, they have some lovely properties. You're forced to scope down
Mm,
So let's say you do a game jam for one day, you must strip down your idea, which is the number one problem with myself
mhm.
and almost every other uh, starting out game maker is they want to make their dream game,
Yeah.
but you'll never be able to finish your dream game with your first outing. It's too hard. Um, so game jams, you don't have enough time to make even like 1/100th of your dream game. You make something really basic,
Mm,
but you finish it, and that's wonderful. And it's a really motivating feeling, and it helps you um, make more stuff. It helped me make more stuff. Um,
mm,
and then there's the other step I kind of only realized more recently, which is that at the end of game jams, there's a period where you're kind of forced to share what you've made.
mhm,
And I think that's another really important thing to get used to, which is to kind of put yourself out there. And it can be hard at the start, particularly when you're terrible at the start. So the games I was making,
mm,
um, only 2 years ago now, um, you know, they're small, they're terrible. But I forced myself to share them, and I kind of practiced the kind of self-promotional and networking skills that are really helpful to any game creator,
mm. Very,
any creator of any content whatsoever, actually.
very cool. And is there, hold on one second, I'm seeing if there's anything more. Someone said DLC, but you said you're going to be working on the game more in the next year, right? So hopefully expansions and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
so we
Hmm.
actually just released an expansion. So
Mm,
the base game is about $15 or equivalent, and we just made an expansion for $5. So like a
mm,
small, we're actually kind of taking a cue from board games.
mm,
So there's one in particular I like a lot called Descent. It's like a old school dungeon crawl with dice and cards and miniatures and dungeons, and they have a nice. Certainly, I like the game. I like the kind of style of expansion they have, where they have some smaller ones that just kind of add little bits, and they have some bigger ones that add, a whole new campaign.
yeah.
So that idea of expansions
Oops.
was one I wanted to explore with this. Whether it's the right move or not, I don't know yet.
Mm. And maybe this is just more of a general industry question. Um, how do you see yourself and maybe the indie community in general continuing to grow in the gaming industry in the next year or two? Like, do you continue to see success, on Steam and with creating these types of games? And do you think it's getting easier for you to, I guess, create your idea for the general populace?
It's definitely gotten easier to create.
Hmm.
Um, the tools have gotten a lot better.
Mm,
Um, there's really good and free tools. There's a lot less barriers than there used to be to actually making a game,
mm,
and there's far less barriers in getting your game buyable,
mhm,
uh, purchasable. Um, so it used to be you needed to set up some sort of like web store. This is going well back, and that was kind of hard.
mm,
Now that's very easy. Getting on Steam is not difficult. Getting on, your game on Apple, it's not very difficult. But the main barrier has never changed, which is
mhm,
it's hard to get noticed.
mm,
So my general advice for anyone making games is to spend as much time on promotion and marketing
mhm,
as you do on game making.
mhm,
Um, and that doesn't have. Some people are really kind of against marketing. They think of it as like advertising, and that it needs to be, kind of tricking people, and
mhm,
that's not true at all. I think it's much more about um, just showcasing what you're making,
mm,
getting used to sharing, finding ways to get any game you're making. If it's interesting, there's going to be people who are going to love it. But there's so many games and distractions and cool things out there. They're not going to just naturally come and find your game.
mm.
You need to put in that little bit of effort to make it to just tell people about what you're making.
Very cool. And so, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know it's pretty late in Ireland. But for people that are looking to buy the game, it is available on Steam, correct?
Yeah, it's out for Windows and Mac.
Hmm. And
Um,
I'm going to post the Steam page onto the chat so people know.
cool.
And we are going to do the giveaway right after the stream ends. So hang tight, people. We're almost there. And yeah, I mean, is there anything I guess you want to say to people that have played the game or to any of your fans? Because it does seem like some people in the chat have played the game and really enjoy the game. So Anything you'd like to say to them?
Huge thanks. We're we're really happy um, to finish the game and to have found so many people who really love the game. Um, that's the most amazing thing, basically, and we're really blown away by that. Um, and I also like to encourage anyone who wants to make games. And sometimes you look on Twitter and Reddit, and it seems very negative.
Mm,
People are saying it's impossible to make it. And it's hard to make it, but it's not impossible.
mm.
And I would say to make something, finish some smaller games, and then try and make something that's a little bit different, and to spend some time as you make it,
Very cool.
sharing it with people. Put some time into sharing what you make as you make it.
Mm. No, thank you. And I think it's really good advice, and I think everyone, both enjoys the advice and the game itself. Uh, we wanted to end with just the title screen music, which I still think is absolutely jaw-dropping amazing. It's one of my favorite songs of the year. So,
Thanks.
yeah, no worries. And so we'll end on that note. And Colm, thank you so much for your time. Again, if you want to play the game, it's on Steam, available for PC and Mac. We'll give away a few copies right after I end the stream. So hang tight, everybody.
Cool.
And again, thank you, Colm.
Thanks, John.
Alrighty, guys. Hang tight. I'll see you guys in just a little bit in the chat.